students and scholars, teachers and trainers, professors and professors, listeners and learners, advocates, administrators, advertisers and advisors, the most honorable present Prime Minister, Sir Dr. Modi ji, respected doctors and ministers, reverend fathers and mothers, affectionate sons and daughters. I, Dr. RKS from USA, heartily, cordially welcome all of you. It is really nice time, nice place, nice section, listening with 100% present sense of mind. The truth of science and spirituality. Dear friends, our daily routine determines our determination. If we are determined to do something better, nicer, finer, greater for this nation, if we want to devote, dedicate ourselves towards the Indian land, then the biggest and highest, topmost spiritual values are that we should be away from materialistic goods as much as we can. This materialism is not made for the sacrificial bodies. By being selfless, we can generate, create, operate, develop something new. For our freedom fighters, messengers, forefathers, foretellers, forecasters, those who came first on this land and provided us the ways, skills, manners, talents, truly and happily, without creating any disturbance, without harming others, whether it was the nature around them, whether nature became friendly with them. The history and autobiography of such persons should be inculcated by us in our mind, in our thoughts. Really, obviously, we have to provide the greatest and the most valuable time of our life to the presence of Lord. If we are the true free thinkers, true freedom fighter, this was the freedom of soul. No doubt our India got freedom in 1947 It was the historical task which was done by the freedom fighters for providing us freedom spiritually, mentally, economically, politically. But the West provider of the freedom of soul, who came first on this land, in the different religions, we study the different status of the missions. In 1947, India got freedom, and in 1948, Shah Mustanaji Maharaj, who came in India for providing the freedom of soul, to make us free from the falsification, avariciousness, greed, lust, ego, negativities, and for the exploiter persons, those who were being exploited at that time by the high class people, he provided the true path, the truth of non-violence. It was the only principle and doctrine that could provide the true freedom. Mahatma Gandhi, who fought for the India's struggle, India's freedom, 1914 to 47, it was the time when Gandhiji efforted well, struggled hard for the non-cooperation movement. He is recorded. He started the principles and doctrines of the life by providing the greatest principle of the truth and non-violence. He was the person. Numberless persons came on this land. Those who are unsung, unrecorded, unread, unspoken, unlistened, unwritten in the history. But how the celestial bodies, how the rising sun, the rising moon, stars, the earth, the ocean, how they can forget? Because our dedication, devotion towards the nation and society, for others, selflessly if we work, then our image, our depiction, our portrayal is stored by that super spiritual power of God. He who is the treasure of spirituality, he who is the greatest and the most wonderful powerhouse of energy, if we become the true particle of that power, ray of that light, wave of that sound, then we are evaluated, examined, observed by the presence of Lord. There is no place where there is no presence of Lord, where there is no presence of God. It is written fundamentally in all the different religions of our Indian land. In air, fire, soil, sky and water, we feel the presence of Lord. It is written in our holy scripture, body is the temple of God, heart is the seat of God. Persons, those who came in the form of incarnation, those who incarnated, came on this land for the salvation and emancipation of our soul. Their aim was to provide us the true freedom of our soul. They addressed the worldly people. We feel the presence of Lord in every ray of light that comes from the sun, from the rising sun, that comes from the way of sound. We feel the presence of Lord. And it was strongly appealed by Swami Vivekananda to the Americans, worldly people, those who were present in the religious conference in 1893, by addressing the two words in a very simple attire, by wearing kurta pajama, by putting a simple turban on his head. He went in the assembly of the UK, USA. When he was given the time to speak, he addressed only two words, and these words created upheaval in the minds of the people, personalities, doctors, ministers, advocates, advertisers, administrators, those who were present at that time, because this was the greatest symbol of our nation and culture. How our cultural values was established. These were not only the words, these were the symbol of our image, of our character, by which our nationalistic and patriotic persons are identified. Our identity, our identification, our introduction is known by the worldly people when we feel the presence of Lord. Not only in air, fire, soul, sky and water, but Swamiji proved it that we feel the presence of Lord even in lightless and soundless places. Our Indian citizens spend their time in varieties, diversities, adversities. But the unique feature of my nation is unity in diversity. Time and again, he repeated this uniqueness, incomparability of our Indian nation. We are made by the God in the different forms, but still we have oneness equality, unity, humanity. We are so humble and polite because we are made by the presence of nature. Nature itself filled us with all the fundamentals of life that are necessary for making our nation fundamentally strong, compassionistic, sympathetic, and humanistic, to fill us with the true values of our nation and society. They came on this land in the form of Gautam Buddha, who started Buddhism, Mahavir Swami, who started Jainism, Brahm Samaj started by Raja Ram Mohan Rai, Dayanand Saraswati, who started Arya Samaj. So these are some of the examples of such persons, those who came on this land as a lighthouse in the ocean for showing the path to the deflected seas, to the deflected persons. Truly, they were not less than the inventors and innovators. This was the true research. And they showed themselves by their simple living. Simplicity is the greatest ornament of those persons who spent their time with nature. Nature knows all ins and outs. Nature provides just everlasting soothing effect of our mind and heart. Endless pleasures, happinesses it provides us. In the form of nature, we have numberless examples. Plants, trees, animals, birds, 84 lakh species that are made by the Lord, and it is written in the chapter of the Genesis, in all the holy religions, God made 84 lakh species and statues initially as a helper of the human beings. Then God created himself in the form of human being, announced and declared that it is only the body of human beings that can reunite with the super spiritual power of God. Nobody could deny it was the body which was prepared by, made by, architectured by God Himself. Dear friends, we have come on this land. What is our true purpose? We have come on this land commonly and generally, but we have special aim behind it. Everyone is special. Everyone's duty is special. As we observe that our all internal organs of the human body, internally and externally, we have specially given to do something special, better, nicer, finer. That is our greatest identity. Who knows the value of past? Individually we are counted. No doubt we may have born in a family which is aristocratic, royal, high class family, but it is a credit to our parents, not to our soul. If individually we want to prove, we want to do, we want to see something better and nicer for our individuality, personality, for becoming a good personality, pleasing personality, then it is our true aim to polish our mind. Man is known by mind. But when we enter into the ocean of spirituality, it says that mind is confined up to WH family question words. If and buts, these things are raised in our mind, not in our heart. Above it, the spiritual soul, soul power, self-confidence that comes, that can be increased, that can be breeded, not from any branch of allopathy, homeopathy, Ayurveda, naturopathy, but it comes from inside. God Himself is the maker, producer of our self-confidence. When we repeat the holy words of God, when we admire, appreciate, praise openly, publicly, personally, professionally, economically, politically, socially, every way, when we appreciate that God who is unchangeable, permanent, who can provide us perfect ecstatic joy of our life, we are to count His numberless blessings and grace. We cannot forget His blessings. He who was, He who will, and He who is. He is omniscient, omnipresent, omnipotent, and omniscient, almighty, in our past, present, and future. He never left us alone in any position, condition, situation. He becomes our true knowledge, information, instruction, and direction of the soul. We should never forget those starters, those who came at the different time. Historically, they divided our life happily, made us happy, provided us numberless facilities. But it is the habit of our man, it is the habit of our negativities, negative power, negative thoughts, that we see the dark side of life. Gentlemen, ladies, dear friends, we must observe the light in the dark. For being optimistic and hopeful person, for having hope against hope, we must see the bright side of life. God has created very wonderful, amazing, outstanding world around us in the form of nature. If we are the positive thinker, then we must provide the best to the God. Willingly and voluntarily, as per the wish of God, we should give ourselves, devote and dedicate our time, place and action to the God as per the will, wish of God. This is a true spiritualistic principle of our life that will help us in healing, in improving our nation, for the betterment and upliftment of our nation and society. If every citizen of our nation will effort well to provide the true knowledge of our past, it was rightly said by the first Prime Minister of our India, Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru, who explained that our present lies in the past. Saint Kabir, who analyzed the presence of soul and super spiritual power of God, Dr. APJ Abdul Kalam, who also proved himself as a nationalistic and patriotistic person of our India, because he used, consumed Indian air, fire, soil, sky and water. So being true nationalistic person, we should give up selfishness as much as we can by taking the great lesson from the rising sun, by taking the great lesson from the nature. Nature is always beneficial. Nature never demands. Nature is the natural provider of the natural gifts. What can we repay to the nature? How can we repay the nature? We can take the numberless examples from the nature that we have around us. Then how a man can be apart from the celestial bodies of nature? We are made by the nature. It's the external nature in the form of the trees, plants, mountains, clouds. The moon, the stars, the sky, the sun, the ocean, we have in the form of nature. And by this nature we should try to understand the internal nature of our internal organs of our human body, because all the externalities has come outside from inside, from in to out, not out to in. This is the right way to understand the God's blessings, miracles, musics, majestics. Early in the morning, the music which is played by the nature, that provides some symbols of our reverberatory music, which is being played inside the human body, inside the human cells. Our dead cells can be activated vibrated by the presence of Lord. When the soul or when the cell of our human body feel that we are feeling the presence of Lord, then automatically it generates its energy, boost energy, turns into the power of speaking, power of reading, listening, speaking, doing something better, nicer, finer, physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually. We feel energetic and rejuvenated. The poor, downtrodden, rejected, dejected, neglected people of our society can be uplifted, bettered by providing them the true knowledge of presence of Lord. This is the presence of Lord, presence of God. Which provides us the company, friendliness, familiarity to share our joys and sorrows. But the biggest thing is that if we have any kind of drawback, fault, flaws, shortcomings in our life, in that condition and position, we must remember, we must keep the memory of our free thinkers, freedom fighters. How have they spent their time? Even there was there was not so much comfortabilities and luxuries. But in spite of that, they maintained the spiritual standard of our nation. By the true knowledge of spirituality, by the presence of Lord, they spent their time. And it is the habit of mind. It contains, it understands 2 to 3 words in one time in speaking, reading, writing and listening of any language. It contains energy. It contains energy in the form of listening the words. It records, it receives. As we have started most modern technologies, digitalogies, electronologies, and we have become totally associated. We are forgetting day by day our ancient, traditional, conventional rituals, customs that were made by our forefathers, foretellers, forecasters, starter, beginners, initiators, for maintaining the spiritual standard of our nation. But we have forgot these things just by running after the means of communication, means of transportation, agriculture, industry, in all the fields of health sector, defense, security. We have forgotten the presence of Lord. It is the greatest drawback. But when we feel unable to fight against the natural disasters which comes in the form of earthquakes, floods, epidemics, then we remember, recollect, record our past. But if we keep the standard of our past history, as our present Prime Minister has started different type of museums and musics of the pastoral personalities, it should be done by every person at home. Our nationalistic, patriotistic, moral, spiritual values that are filled by our nation in our nature, we cannot refuse from them, and we have to accept them. We have to devote and dedicate our time maximum to them for maintaining the spiritual standard of our nation. Whether our nation is developing nation throughout the world, but we are the most developed in spiritual and moralistic values. These are the moral values, spiritual values that cannot be sailed. That values are filled in us by the nature. Nature nurtures us like a mother. Nature treats us like a doctor. Nature guides us like a supervisor. It teaches us like a teacher. So nature plays multidimensional, multifaceted, multi-sided roles to make us happy, to make us comfortable. Dear friends, doctors, ministers, advocates, advertisers, administrators, fathers and mothers, affectionate sons and daughters, our past, the system of our past, the values that are contained by our villages, we are to maintain them and for the glory and brightness of our nation, we should associate our youngsters with the modernity as we are using different type of means of communication through the digitalogy. We are turning towards our past. It's the great blessing and grace of God. If we have become most modern by using online programs, live programs, it's not a matter of ego, but it's a matter of pride. But it's a matter of to be thought better, nicer, finer, greater. Because these things makes us aware about our past. If these things are so powerful, speedy, energetic, that it concentrates and turns our energy towards itself, then how was the power of our past? How was the power of our ancestors? That was unrelenting, unceasing, unstopping. We are to maintain that. Swami Vivekananda addressed the whole people. Unread, impossible to read. Unspoken, impossible to spoken. Impossible to speak. Unwritten is impossible to written. To write. For all the languages, cultures, customs, rituals, manners, styles, skills are needed to be improved, reformed. I thank God. I thank all the listeners and learners, because listeners are greater than the speakers. Listeners plays the role of a judges. But the God who is the judge of judges, He knows each and everything. I bless. I get blessings and grace of God. I thank God who provides presence of Lord. Thank you, dear friends, dear brothers and sisters. धन्यवाद.